Counting down. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We live. Aphiwe, how's it?
Good man, good man.
Okay. So the question I always open with whenever I'm in the streets and I speak to people, and I've asked you this question before, but it's to get it out the way. So do you hate me because I'm white? And the reason why I ask that is because I don't hate you because you're not white. And that's the opening question.
You know, as we spoke, as we started, you know, the question, I don't want it to be cliche. It's easy to say, yes, I don't hate you.
Yeah.
Because that is, like I said, a beautiful thing.
Okay.
It's a nice thing for me not to hate you. And hatred maybe is a weak word here. I don't hate you as an individual.
I find that often, that most people will say that they don't hate me, and I've acknowledged that I don't hate them. There's probably, out of the 200-300 conversations I've had, there's maybe one or two that in talking, they weren't being truthful. They actually do hate me, but all the rest, it isn't hate.
But what I'm trying to get us at here, maybe trying to be genuine in my answer, is when you ask that question, do I hate you because you are white?
Yeah.
Are you asking me whether I hate white people, or are you asking me whether I hate you?
The question simply is, do you hate me because I'm white?
Because you are white.
So in other words, it would imply that potentially, do you hate white people?
So you're putting yourself at a place where you represent white people, as you are asking me, do you hate me because
Possibly.
I'm white? So I don't hate you because you are white, but there are feelings that I would be lying to myself if I say they are resolved within my heart when I think about white.
Okay, what are those feelings? Can I offer?
Yeah.
Fear? Do we fear each other? Is it reasonable to expect that we would fear each other?
I think resentment.
Resentment. Okay.
I think resentment more than fear, because I don't walk scared of white people.
Okay.
But there is an element of resentment
Towards.
sometimes, and it's an element that I know I always have to check. It's an element that I always know that I have to find a channel and an appropriate expression of it, and maybe kill.
What, kill the expression?
The feeling itself of resentment.
The feeling. What do you resent?
It's not something that is every day. It's not something that is every day, but it's something that maybe surfaces when you think about the social setup of our country. When I think about how things are,
Okay.
you know, who walks to work, who drives to work, you know, who never runs out of what, who runs out of what. And I understand that I may be flawed even in my assessment of that. So as much as I don't hate, I can't lie to myself and say it's all good.
All good. I think clearly it's not. One of the reasons why I ask the question in that way is because there are problems. It's to try and work out what the problems are in order to work our way through them. Because we don't hate each other. It seems very clear when I've spoken to literally hundreds of people. I go to the airport and I ask the question. We end up talking for an hour, 2 hours, and we have good conversations because although there isn't hate, there are things that are in the way.
Definitely.
So what we would hope to do is try and identify some of the things. The term that we've used, you and I, is that they're obstacles that are preventing people of different ethnic groups from building bridges. And that's basically the idea. There's these obstacles, things like accusations of black entitlement, that very often white people will throw the accusation of, or white privilege, or African time. A lot of people, I myself, get frustrated in dealing with black people, predominantly black people, not so much colored people, when I've got a certain understanding of how to behave within the context of time and schedules and appointments, where there's those frustrations that come in dealing with black people. They've got a different way of seeing it. Now, I'm not saying my way is right, or your way is right or wrong, but that creates barriers. And those are the types of things that I want to deal with. So if we ever look at the simple question of, do you hate me because I'm white? I don't hate you because you're not. And we can agree to that. Then what are the problems? What do you think, what would you say is, because you've got resentment, what can you highlight as one of the main problems that we have? I mean, what's the problem? Simply put, I suppose.
I think cultural understanding, because in time past we never lived in the same space, we never shared the same space.
Right.
But as we come together, as we get to see each other, as we get into each other's space, there is a realization that we are two different cultures. There are maybe more than two, but there are different cultures, and so there are the cultural privileges and the cultural understandings of what should happen and how becomes the frustration when it's not, properly understood. I'm not sure if you're catching me there.
No, I do. I grew up in Johannesburg. I've told you this before. I grew up in Johannesburg. I was a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. My father was Afrikaans, my mother's British, from descent. Now, I went to a primary school where it was mostly Jewish people, and then Italians, and then the odd white Anglo-Saxon Protestant like myself. Then I went to a high school where it was, again, a lot of Jewish people, a lot of Italians, a lot of Greeks, a lot of Portuguese, a lot of Lebanese, even the odd Yugoslav was there, and then the odd white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. And although we didn't necessarily have the same culture, we did know and understand how to cooperate with each other. Jews marry Jews generally, Greeks marry Greeks generally, whites marry whites generally, blacks marry blacks generally. There's not necessarily anything, I don't believe there's anything necessarily wrong with that, because you've got a common unity. Now, although we didn't have the common unity, you've got the Greek religion, the Greek Orthodox Church, then you get the Jewish going by the Torah, then you got your Catholics, etc. So we all have different origins and backgrounds, yet we have found a way to cooperate.
Yeah.
So how do we engage with the topics that are preventing us from cooperating at least? We don't necessarily need unity, but can we somehow find cooperation? What is, can you think of anything that's preventing us at the moment from, and not you and I, because we've already started cooperating, but black and whites, or whites and non-whites? And I want to qualify whites and non-whites because that's how we were divided before. It was whites only. It wasn't whites and then no coloreds, no Indians, no blacks. It was like whites only and everybody else was excluded. So and non-whites were the excluded. So from that point of view, not to white supremacy statement, I'm not saying that. That's what the statement was. That's why I'm qualifying it. So what is preventing us from building bridges between the different ethnic groups in order to at least get cooperation? Because what's so sorely lacking, I think, in the country.
It's interesting that you mentioned a couple of cultures that you were able to cooperate with, the Italians, the Greeks, the Jews and all that, and those were people that you coexisted harmoniously.
Yeah.
With the understanding
Mostly.
of different
Every now and
cultures.
then we had a little fisticuffs.
But the cultures were understood and accepted,
Yeah.
and you could share the same space.
Correct.
It's interesting that you are bringing that up. But if you think about the non-whites and the whites,
Yeah.
we are coming from a place of separation.
Yes.
And that place of separation dealt a heavy blow. And that blow
Yeah.
is actually what we need to undo right now. That's what we need to undo as we try to live and share and cohabitate in the same space.
Where do we start with that? Because I think that's what we want to try and get to. Where do we start with that?
I think it would begin, it starts at home. I think we need to also clarify that it starts at home.
Good.
There is no legislation. There is no legislation in parliament, in whatever governmental institution that can institute and constitute love. Love cannot be constituted.
No.
So it starts at home, teaching your children to love people regardless of color. That's where we need to make great strides if we wanted to get somewhere. And then in public spaces, let's not be accusing each other. There are accusations against each other that can actually stick and stand. We understand that. We don't need to be accusing each other now. The case is made, there was a problem, and the problem has created a problem. And the problem is what we are dealing with now.
Right.
So we are not trying to build a case. There is a case. How do we solve the case? Maybe that's the attitude we need to adopt first. Can I understand where you come from? Can I sympathize with some of the things you could not do anything about when injustice was done against me? Am I willing to understand you? And where you sit, are you willing to understand me and my resentment? Do you see where it comes from? Instead of just, saying that's what they are. That's how blacks always have been. Irresponsible.
I think that's I was thinking about it this morning. There's certain accusations. And on the one hand, we try and go, no, but that's not real. That doesn't exist. So, for example, the accusation of white privilege. Okay. And the reason why I say accusation, because it's not really an argument, it's merely an accusation to shut white people up. And from a white person's perspective, I know that many people, I even at one stage said, there's no such thing as white privilege. Now, whether it actually exists or not is almost secondary, because it certainly does exist as a truth to some. And if it's true to some people, whether they're right or wrong, then it does exist purely because people believe it.
I think before we can say whether white privilege exists or it does not exist, we need to define it. How would it look like if it existed? What is white privilege?
Sure.
I think we need to clearly define that. Maybe white privilege is not so much about the fact that whites have material things.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just because whites are regarded as superior.
Yeah.
In just intellectually, they get more respect than black people. Maybe that's what the privilege is. And
Okay.
if then that's the privilege we are talking about, that is a reality.
Okay, even if it's not, this is the point, even if it's not actually what is manifesting, and I'm not saying it's not, but even if it's not, if that viewpoint is alive in somebody's thought process, then that is actually a reality whether it exists or not. It's the same as a monster. You get a monster under the bed. Now, we know, you and I might know, that there is no monster under the bed. But if the child is sleeping on the bed and believes that there is a monster under the bed, there's a monster under that bed. That child will behave and react and respond according to what they believe to be true, whether it's true or not. And for that one reason, when it comes to the accusation, the argument, the statement of white privilege, and it's what you're saying, I think it's what you're saying, is whether it is actually real or not, we have to look at it as if it is real. In order to discover, firstly, if it isn't real, let that be exposed. If it is real, what is it? And if it is real to the extent of what it is, to what extent does it have an impact on the lives of all South Africans, black and white? Because the other day a lady said to me, and we were talking about it, we want to go do this academic review at the university, right? And I wanted to get through to the lectures. And this lady said to me, she said, yeah, the only reason you could speak to the university lectures is because you're white. Did you use your white privilege to get in? And when she first said it to me, I almost found like I needed to defend myself. And then I went home and I thought about it and I realized actually I couldn't get in without you. It was your contact at the university, and he even said to you he doesn't want to speak to me unless you will refer him, and then he first wanted to hear what I had to say before he would even speak to me. So in her mind, the only reason I was able to speak to the university about an academic review on a concept was because I had white privilege, but it was actually exactly the opposite in that instance. Not to say white privilege doesn't exist, but it certainly didn't manifest there.
In that, yeah.
And that was interesting to me. See, I didn't understand white privilege a while ago in the context, because I'd ignored it, like most South Africans do. Because, let me put it this way. So we've got black economic empowerment in South Africa. Okay, it's something imposed on industry by the government. I think personally it's a good idea to empower the people who were disadvantaged previously. But it's like me saying to you on Sunday, you're going to the beach. Now, going to the beach is nice, but what happens if you don't want to go on Sunday? and I'm enforcing it onto you that you have to go on Sunday. Now you don't feel free to go to the beach. You feel as though if you don't go to the beach, you've lost your, if you go to the beach, you've actually lost your freedom. So there's a dynamic of something being imposed on you that you resist. So that's the example that I'm using for white privilege. I didn't even look at the reality of the potential even of white privilege existing, because it wasn't given to me as a discussion or even an argument. The way it was delivered to me was an accusation to shut me up. You have white privilege, you have nothing to say, you have nothing to contribute, and you are irrelevant in this discussion. How do I then engage with a discussion with somebody who sees me purely because I'm white, having nothing to say? So for that reason I shut off. That's why I think we have to examine the reality of what it is, and that's why I'm also saying, even if white privilege doesn't actually exist, because it exists in the minds of many, you have to say that it does exist because it's real to some. And we've got to deal with that issue.
I mean, that's plausible, because then you are not ruling the possibility of its existence off.
Yeah.
You know, and when you have the interest to actually look at it, then we can actually get somewhere. I think that's the attitude we need to answer your question.
Yeah. Okay.
That's the attitude we need in dealing with the resentments. Now, but I want to flip this. This. Do you hate me because I am black?
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. If you were an absolute idiot, I would hate you for other reasons, but I certainly don't hate you because of the color of your skin. In actual fact, I think a lot of people actually have more empathy because of the color of your skin, because we know that you suffered more. A lot of people that I speak to, in the reaching out in the moment, even in the crisis.
Okay, wait a second. Just hold that thought. Do you pity me because I am black?
No. I pity your suffering regardless of your color, maybe. I pity, is pity the right word? Empathize? It's a damn good question. Don't catch me on the spot. Do I pity you because you're black? No. Pity is for somebody who is pitiful. Pathetic. You're not pathetic. I'll pity anybody who's pathetic. I'm certainly not going to pity you because you're black, but I might pity you if you're pathetic. Okay, so that actually helps me, because we need to guide our empathy correctly. A lot of people might want to assist because they have a superiority complex. Other people might want to assist because we've got to try and find the reasons why. So that's why it's such a damn good question. No, I don't pity you because you're black. I have empathy, not because you're black, but because many black people have suffered for a long time. Many black people still are suffering. But then how do we take the empathy into something constructive and not destructive? I don't know how to do that. On a grand scale, I don't know how we can do that just yet.
Yeah, no, I was merely asking that. I was merely asking that because of the obviously experiences that I've had. Many times I've been given opportunities, and sometimes I've often wondered whether did I get that opportunity because someone wanted to see if was it a chance, or was it because they were pitying me that maybe I don't have food at home and all that, or were they giving me a chance as they would to another person? You know, it's a fine line, really, even in the question.
Okay, let me challenge you on that, because honestly, the motivation of the other, does it really matter? If given an opportunity, if you take it, is it not what you make of it, not why it was given? It's like if I give you, I don't know, what's an analogy of that? I give you a sandwich because I pity you, but you're hungry, just eat it. Or you give me money for petrol because you pity me. So I need petrol. Why don't I just use it?
Look, it's not relevant whether you are being, somebody's pitiful over you or not. That's not relevant. But I think we need to bring it up.
Yeah, you're right.
We need to bring it up to a human level where you don't help somebody because of how they look. You help somebody because you actually are a helpful individual to other human beings, regardless of how they look. And again, maybe we are getting off the topic.
That's fine. We've probably got 1,000 topics that we could go through. As you're talking, I'm thinking about there's a lesson that I examined, if you like. There's the aspect of different attributes of the individual. One of it is loving kindness. The other one is discipline, and then there's another thing called compassion. And they're actually three different things, because compassion doesn't necessarily just come out of loving kindness. And in this analysis of how to attain or how to extend compassion, what they said is you need to bring in the attribute of loving kindness, that's the care for the individual, with the element of discipline, self-discipline and discipline for the other. And then what you've got to do is you've got to marry those two through the truth of what the individual really needs, and that is compassion. Does that make sense? So you get a whole lot of people that they've good intentions. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. So you get this, there's a story of this woman who went, she's an American woman, she went into somewhere, I don't remember exactly where, doesn't matter that she was an American. And she found this village that was suffering quite a high rate of HIV. So she had compassion for them, or she had this loving kindness for them. So what she did is she went and she organized through a pharmaceutical company, she organized antiretrovirals or whatever the drugs were at the time, a cocktail of drugs, that these people in taking them would prolong their life and combat HIV, etc. And she did her good deed, and she had wonderful intentions. What she didn't do is walk the process of how to apply those drugs, because there was a very specific way that you had to take them every day, and you had to take them at the same time. Otherwise what happened is your body became immune to the drugs, and the next cocktail cost 10 times the amount. That whole village was nearly wiped out, and they died because nobody could afford to sponsor them the next batch of cocktails, which cost so much more. Now this is a story, I believe it's from the early 90s. So there what she did is she had a good intention. She didn't apply it with discipline and to exactly what they actually needed. She just said, oh, well, what they need is this, let me give it to them. But what they also needed was the education, and she ended up destroying them. How many times have you got a guy walking down the road, let's say, and he's an alcoholic or he's a drug addict, and he's out and he's left, and you want to help him. So what you do is you give him $10. How many times giving him the $10 actually causes more damage than good? How many times should it be that we should, and we don't know, because the individual is different and in a different space every single time. This is a difficult thing to grapple with in terms of engaging with somebody to offer them assistance. You and I, we talk a lot. So for me to understand your need and question your need is available, but many times it's a guy just walking down the road, and you think, I want to do something. What can I do? Well, what's the easiest thing to do? Well, let me give him $10, or let me offer him a job, or let me... And it's a good intention, but maybe it is the road to hell, which is paved. Because I don't see a lot of gratitude for the intentions of doing good, and maybe there shouldn't be, because it isn't done with loving kindness and discipline through the element of truth.
I like that, because then it brings me to the question, and maybe not the question, but the attitude or the feeling that I've had over times. Let's call it an observation.
Okay.
I think I mentioned it to you in time past, that the help sometimes, white people, there's an irritation that many times I sense, that white people are irritated by a group of people who seem to be ungrateful. That would be blacks many times. People would say, we bend over our backs for you, but still, the entitlement accusation, the black entitlement accusation. We bend our backs, we're trying this and this, but you don't seem to see anything. Whites doing so much good, and yet only to hear a black person saying, this is what they are, this is how they are, they are racist, and they are animals and all that. To hear all those things while you think you are doing so much, that's an irritant, and I understand how that could be.
Certainly, yeah.
But I want to draw our attention to the fact that the separation that happened in our country, the gulf that is separating us, is so toxic that what you do, because it has to skip over, it has to go through that gulf, you have to reach over, because there is no bridge really.
No.
It's almost like you are taking a leap to the other side of, because separation is still there as much as we are trying to pull together. That gulf is so toxic that it turns the help to something else. when it lands to the person who was being helped, it's like it's just a pet. You know, it's a love given to
It's
a
like
pet.
helping a pet, like feeding your Maltese
yeah.
poodle.
It's
I like Maltese poodles, by the way. But I get what you're saying.
It's like you are just patronizing me, you know.
We had a discussion a while ago about black entitlement. And I asked you, I said, tell me, I presented you my side of the accusation of white privilege, and I asked you to present to me your side, the accusation of black entitlement. And I remember the first thing you came back to me with is you said, are we not at least entitled to what was taken from us? Remember that?
Yeah, yeah.
And it caught me at first, because how do we qualify what was taken? And that's a minefield of a discussion.
Yeah.
I mean, some people saying you took this and you took that, etc. But we actually came down to, and I think this is what we actually identifying, or you seem to be identifying in the gulf of separation, is what was actually taken. Primarily was humanity. Dignity. Can we restore anything until we've restored that? Is anything even worth restoring until we've restored that? Because the laws, the people, the interactions, the separation, the apartheid, the divisions, the privilege for some and not for others, reduced black people, non-white people, to less than human. That can be restored. You also told me a story about how me and you sitting at this table right now.
It's finished.
Is it? Well, let's carry on this way. Me and you sitting at this table right now, and black African walking in, how would they identify us at this table? And should I give you the video? Talk to the camera.
Yeah, and it's.
Or talk to me. Just look. Yeah.
They would identify. They would identify me as a human being, and they would identify you as umlungu.
So how would they phrase it? They would say at that table
There is umdoiwan, and nomlungu. So there is one person and a white man. That is how that would be phrased. Because it's umlungu and nomndu. So I am umndu, which means a human being, and umlungu, which means a creature from the sea.
A creature from the sea.
A creature from the sea. Obviously taken from the fact that Jan van Riebeeck came through with the boat. So the origins is not known. We only saw him when he came to the shores of the Cape, you know. So that is a creature from the sea. And so a white person is not regarded as a human in African cultures. In African cultures, especially in the rural areas. In the rural areas, kids grow up believing that he's a creature from the sea. And yeah, that's right. And that's why he can swim so good.
I'm going to flip that around. Okay, so that for me is interesting, because one of the things that was manifest not just in sentiment, because you've expressed a sentiment, which is valuable and it's dangerous, but not just in sentiment, the law actually reduced you guys to less than human. It was, I think that was perhaps the main thing that was stolen, yet it's still apparent today, because it's not just a white phenomenon that whites have reduced blacks to less than human. It's blacks have also regarded, in some, not talking about all blacks, this is not a blanket statement, but in terms of aspects of cultural from both, we don't see each other as human. So as much as your humanity, your dignity was removed from you in the past, at the moment there is still an element of not even recognizing that whites are human. That's a divide created by both. That's a pit and a hole dug by both parties, and we both complain about the same thing.
You see, I think Dean, you
just turn it towards you again.
No, I've got them.
You got that one?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
I think Dean, you have hit the nail on the head when you say we have both dug the hole. When you say we have both dug the hole, because you have regarded me as something less than a human, and on the other side, I've regarded you as something less than a human. And that is what I will keep referring to the original question you asked. How can we fix it?
Yeah.
I'll keep referring to that question, because if we want to fix it, then we need to do the same. Again, reverse the same. The hole that we've been digging, both of us, we need to fill that hole now. We need to fill that hole now, realizing that we are both human beings. We are both human beings, because the accusations that keeps going on and on, that this is what whites are, this is what whites do, this is, and the whites on the other side are doing the same thing. This is what blacks are, this is what blacks do. They are lazy, the kafirs again, they are at it again, and all that. And we on the other side, that is what keeps South Africa segregated. In fact, I think it could be said that we are more divided than we ever was.
If possible.
We are more divided than we ever were in the apartheid era. In the apartheid era, we were just not allowed to sit next to each other. There was not this much hatred going on. The only people who knew what was happening was the elite. Yeah. The elite group that was actually in the front lines fighting that separation and those laws. The people on the ground, they were not aware. But with much awareness, what has spread more than anything is hatred, not love. And yet that is after democracy and reconciliation has been declared a reality. So the reverse is true.
It's interesting because you've actually stumbled onto something here, because what was taken was your humanity. Perhaps even in taking your humanity, you were given the opportunity to see us as less than human as well. But is that not the key to the beginning of restoration? This is actually the Western dream, isn't it? It's that in the person sitting across from me, you sitting across from me, I see value. There is part of the creation and the creator in you. That is your sovereign identity. The value that is in you is the same value that is in me. If that can be recognized, if I can see you as a valuable individual, you can see me as a valuable individual, then we can start interacting.
And then to add, just on what you are saying, let me add to what you are saying. Just as a respect to our audience, I believe you and your sincerity in what we are doing because of the off-camera work that we've done, because of the off-camera moments we've had. So it's not the kumbaya moments that will fix things in South Africa.
The kumbaya moments.
It's not the kumbaya moments that will fix things in South Africa, because what we've seen, even with the TRC and all that, those were all just kumbaya moments on camera, but off camera. That's where the work is. When we meet each other in the restaurant, who do you think I am? When we meet each other at the supermarket queues, do you think you should have been in front of me because I'm black? When we meet at the traffic lights, do you lock your car because you think a thief has just pulled next to you? So those are the things that we need to consider when we are building up, because it's really what happens during the day off camera that creates what becomes the resentment. What becomes the resentment?
Now we can take maybe a kumbaya statement, well put, but it's actually the right application, is that in order for me to see change, I need to be the change that I want to see. So if I want to see interaction between black and white, I need to want to interact with black. I need to see them as valuable. I need to see others as valuable and not use the term see them as valuable, because it's not them and us anymore. It's actually us. It is like what your shirt says, black or white, red blood. I can get a blood transfusion from you. I can't get one from a dog. I can't get one from a whale, even though it's a mammal. I can get one from you. So you can get one from me.
A human race.
There's a human race. That's the element of it's no longer them and us, although there is an aspect of that culturally that we can maybe respect their culture and they can respect ours, and that doesn't need to be divisive. But in order for us to build, so what we basically determined is the starting point is to see that white people have a value, and that white people can see that non-white people have the same value, and we can restore each other's humanity to each other, and interact with each other as humans. And then it's for each one of us, individual, to be that change, and then it will become manifest.
Yeah.
It's actually quite simple. It might not be easy.
It is simple and yet not easy because it's an attitude thing. It can't be detected. The kumbaya moments, when in public, it's easy to act as though, because to be a racist is not a noble virtue. So
To be a racist is not
a noble virtue.
a noble virtue.
To be a racist is not a noble virtue. So no one will willingly stand on the mountaintop and say, I am a racist. But it's what lives in the secret chambers of your heart that needs to be stirred. And you need to work at that as a human being.
So 35 minutes later, we've got a kumbaya statement, and that is be the change that you want to see.
Be the change that you want to see.
And just recognize the humanity of the man, woman, child sitting across
Black
from you.
or white, red blood.
Black or white, red blood.
Black and white, red blood. Thank you, Dean. Like the video?
I think we can replicate it. My name is Dean Haystack, the Dean, and you're listening to The Coffee Conversation.